of history of Mason through the eyes of Ludell Cheney tonight, and he's going to tell us about the milk plant that started up, and we all know now as Wyeth. So it is with a great deal of pleasure that I introduce Ludell Cheney to you again. Now, do you want the chair? No. All right, I'll use it. No, you have a chair. Well, and, yeah, that's what I wondered. How about that? Is that going to work? Yep. And you're taping for your grandchildren, is that right?
That's myself. Okay, I'm real glad to be here. I know most of you. I spoke to most of you. Linda, I'm awful sorry you got in here and I didn't even see you. When I sat down in the chair, I said, well, who is that young lady there? Why, that's my old friend Linda Rowe. Okay, Nathan, I'm afraid it's going to get by your bedtime. I might have 30 minutes here, I don't know. But if you have to go, you go ahead. First thing I'm going to say is that both my parents and my brother and I attended this school. I think a lot more of it now than I did when I was attending it, however. I would always rather work than I would to go to school. I love work. We always took Farmers Week off and went to college at least one day during Farmers Week. I remember we used to go on the interurban from Mason here, go up through Holt and Lansing, out to East Lansing, make a revolution around the little block or two there, and come back. We went up to college many times for Farmers Week on the last week of January or the first week of February back for many, many years. A lady called me last week and says, are you the one that's going to talk about Wyeth? I said, yes. She said, how far back you going? Well, I said, I'm going to the beginning of it. She told me her name was Lillian Wyeth. I knew her many, many years ago. I knew all the family. I'm sure she won't mind me telling you this story. I've heard it many times. I've told it many times. But the year that I started high school, the year I was 6 years old, we had a street fair uptown in September. Farmers brought in seed corn, chickens. I don't know what all. I don't remember all of that. I know my dad had an exhibit of seed corn there. We've got a picture of it at home. It said raised by Ludell Cheney. And they had a parade. Couldn't tell you what day it was. But right after the parade, I was right in front of what is about the store, Keen's store, right next to Jack Davis's. The parade was over, and I ran across the street. And Mrs. Whipple was driving a car, and she accidentally ran over me. Now, I didn't, the wheels got over my body. The car went over my body. And I was severely bruised, but no bones were broken. And I called on her many times after that. After I was married, we used to butcher beef on Monday, and we'd peddle it out of Mason here during the Depression on Tuesday. And I called on her many times. She bought meat from me. Beef it was. And you know, every time she saw me, she told me about that incident. Which was okay. I sure learned a lesson from it. I guess I've been careful about crossing the streets ever since. I can remember that day just as though it were yesterday, Lillian. Tom Corbin was a policeman uptown. And as Mrs. Whipple went over my body, I got up, of course, ready-to-wear store, which is a part of Keene's also now. And they had Dr. Ballard come up. Think of Dr. Ballard. He was a doctor for many years. To see if there were any bones broken. There wasn't, so the day went on. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about Wyeth tonight. I told someone today that I was going to talk about the milk plant. I said, what's the milk plant? Well, I said, Wyeth over here is a milk plant. They didn't know that. Where have you been all this time? I talked to senior citizens up at City Hall last Thursday. There's a family here that were up there that night, that day. I told them when I came in, I said, well, I won't tell you the same thing tonight that I told you last Thursday. I live on a centennial farm. It's been in the family 130 years. I sleep in the same room I was born in 82 years ago next month. Our farm has grown from 71 acres to well over several hundred now. It was 365 when I gave up the realm. The next generation took over. And I still help a little bit. In fact, this morning I drew several loads of soybeans to town. I like to truck hogs to market. I like to drive a truck. I like to run errands. As far as working, I don't do much work. Well, now to start the Wyeth plant. A man from Cleveland came to Mason in early November of 1919. He had heard that the Borden Company in Lansing were going to close their milk supply. As the population was growing so fast in Cleveland, they needed more milk. Well, he was hoping to get the Borden milk supply to send to Cleveland. Well, he was up here and found out the population was growing just as fast in Lansing as it was in Cleveland. And the other dairies assumed the Borden milk supply. So this man, Nicholas, came to Mason, and he went to the Ingham County News. Scott Marshall was the publisher at that time. The Ingham County News was housed in the southern part of what's Keene's store at the present time. And he told him, Mr. Scott Marshall, that he was looking for a place for a milk supply. If he could find an area where they would assure him of a milk supply, they would build a plant. Well, Scott Marshall was a really public-spirited man. He got several people together, told them what the proposition was. Well, they called a meeting at the courthouse for farmers to come in to listen to the proposition, to see if he could get a supply of milk. The article that I have, paper, published in the Ingham County News at that time, said there were 400 farmers attended that meeting. Now, I don't know how you get 400 farmers in that quarter, but maybe you can. That seems like an awful lot of people to me. Well, anyway, that's what the article says. They had a lot of farmers, a lot of interest in milk. They decided, the farmers decided that they wanted to sell milk. Mr. Nicholas says, if you will assure us a milk supply, we will build a plant in Mason. So it got started. They started to dynamite the ground for the foundation on the 1st of January, probably the 2nd of January of 1920, hoping to get it going that year. April 1st of 1920, the foundation was in. they had bought the brickyard, put up ice. They shipped milk and cream to Cleveland by the box car, and it needed many pounds of ice for each load to go to Cleveland. So that's why they bought the brickyard. They put up ice that winter, 1920. They hoped to get the plant going in the fall of 1920, but difficulties set in with the equipment, and it wasn't opened until the 15th of March, 1921. But the first load of milk that came in, first day's receipts were 19,000 pounds of milk. And they had 27 milk routes around the Mason area. I know the man in our neighborhood lives south of us. I suppose they were all Ford trucks, but I don't know about that. But they had hard rubber tires, I remember that. They didn't go very fast, of course, down the road. The man that I remember that went by the paint schoolhouse, his name was Easter, lived out near the river. And the man in our neighborhood lives south of our place. And for any farmer that he returned the cans the day they were picked up, he returned the cans after the milk was done. But any farmers that lived south of him had to have 2 sets of cans right away. So he'd not make 2 trips to the farm. So the next day he'd take the empty cans, pick up the full ones, come into Mason. Well, on our road from Columbia Road to Barnes Road, there were 10 farms. And at one time, every farm sold milk to the milk plant. We didn't sell milk there for quite some time, but we did after a while. But this man would bring the cans home. He'd stop up Bartlett's, leave 2 cans, Ames's 2 or 3 cans. And the man across the road from where I live had just 1 can. It wasn't full, of course. But anyway, he set that can in the cab. And when he got down to our house, he'd just slow up a little bit and open the door, and he'd kick that can out when he got up the driveway. So the cover came off every time. I don't know how much dirt got in the can or not, whether it was washed or not either. But anyway, that's the way it was. I used to love to come to town with him. Then we had another man that drew milk for 20 years south of us. He had a Dodge truck, and he missed very few days in the whole 20 years. And I don't remember how many cans it held, but I presume 50 or 60 cans. But it was quite a lot of milk anyway. The Wyeth plant started out as Laboratory Products Company. That was the name of it. In 1925, Laboratory Products sold out to SMA Corporation. In 1938, it was sold to American Home Products Company. Ira Wilson and Sons rented it for a while during that time, and I just haven't got that date down here, but it's in between there. Well, then in 1939, John Wyeth and brother acquired it. So it's been Wyeth for over 50 years. 1939. Can anyone tell me when the bank holiday was? Was it in March of 1933? That's my date. Has anyone got a date different than that? Huh?
No, it was March, because it was FDR, and they went in March at that time, the president.
It was March or April. We didn't get a milk check. And they paid by cash. And all the farmers had to go to jail to get their milk money. As I recall, we went at least once, and I think twice. Of course, milk checks were only once a month 1,800 cans every other day. The cans were filled by hand and labeled by hand and shipped to Cleveland by boxcar. All right, I should have told a little bit about this. Doctor sent this baby food recipe up here for a trial run, and it turned out to be successful, which was called SMA afterwards. And it's and that Art straightened me out on this one time. I didn't know what SMA stood for. Synthetic Mothers Adopted.
Adapted.
Adapted. Adapted. Okay. Thought that didn't sound right. But anyway, we were in Hawaii a number of years ago, and we took a walk downtown, and we went by a drugstore. Seemed like the first thing. And in the window of this drugstore was a display of SMA baby food. I said that baby food has got to come from Mason, Michigan, or Idaho, or Philadelphia. So they have 3 plants that produce baby food.
Don't pay attention to that clock.
Well,
It's not 25 after yet. You're doing good.
I'm supposed to be done in 30 minutes here.
Okay.
I think I'm going to. I don't want to quit. I've really been working on this again. I've given this speech a couple of times, but I have to go over every once in a while. I want to tell you about when we quit selling milk to Wyeth. This is kind of a sour note. I was milking 5 or 9 cows by hand, and they were producing real well. We had a field of Sudan grass that year. This was 1936. And there's a lot of milk in Sudan grass. Well, these 9 cows would one up and milk a year. That was my first year in cow testing work, cow testing association work. And we finished up the year as high herd in the county with a 14,000 pound herd average and 470 pounds of fat. Well, nowadays they're just twice that. A lot of 30,000 pound cows nowadays, 1,000 pound fat records and so on and so forth. That was high herd in Ingham County for that year. We did achieve one goal. We were in the 500 pound club before we quit the cows. To be in the 500 pound club, you had to average 500 pounds of butter fat for 5 consecutive years. And 500 pounds that particular year. So we did get in that club before we quit. Well, to go back to this 5 cans of milk, milking by hand, I'd get 1 can rejected for several days. And I could not figure out why on earth they'd send 1 can back. I've always thought that they had too much milk. That's one way to get rid of some of it. But anyway, the manager of Wyeth at that time, his name was Percy Jones. He lived over here on Columbia Street. And I called him up. I told him I was very, very dissatisfied. I just can't understand why you reject 1 can of milk out of 5 so many days. He come out and he couldn't find anything wrong. Finally, the Lansing dairy field man went by. I don't remember whether I stopped him or whether I sent word to him. Lansing Dairy had taken on quite a few producers in the area. Lansing I said before I get done, I'm going to have 50 shares, which I did, but it took me a long time to get it. An awful long time. Well, I want to tell you just one more thing about the Lansing Dairy. I was on the board of directors from 1957 to 1969. During that time, they merged with McDonald's and Flint, and they changed over from bulk or can cooling to bulk tanks like we have nowadays. It was a purely voluntary venture. It wasn't a request from the board of directors. However, each of the board of directors bought a tank right away, and the company was going to advance the money for all these bulk tanks. Our bulk tank cost $2,500 when we bought it. The company paid us 10 cents extra, 100 for the bulk milk, and the hauler charged 10 cents less. So we had to pay a nickel out of our paycheck to make 25 cents 100 on that bulk tank. I figured out that I would have to produce 1 million pounds of milk to pay that $2,500. And the deals were set up for 5 years. And we produced enough milk so that we paid for our tank in 2.5 years. So I thought that was quite an accomplishment. One more thing I should say about Wyeth here. After they got started, they offered a premium of 10 cents 100 if you produce 300 pounds of milk or more. Well, 300 pounds of milk is 4 cans. 4 days 32, so 4 cans of milk is 320 pounds of milk. And of course, that was quite an incentive for farmers at that time, 10 cents 100 extra. And same way with the Lansing Dairy, we had to have the stock to sell there, and you got 10 cents over the market then with your stock.
Ludell, will you entertain some questions from the group? I think there's at least one person that has wanted to ask you something here. A little history.
I might be able to, but I'll see.
Okay.
Just a minute.
Okay.
I want to give you just a few comparisons of prices in 1910 and 1989. The population of the United States was 92,407,000. 1989, 248 million. A 3-bedroom house in 1910 could be bought for $2,650. 89, 88,000. The average income was $520 in 1910, 30,089. A new Ford cost $780, 11,000. A dozen eggs, 34 cents, and 86 cents. A loaf of bread was a nickel and 71 cents. A gallon of milk was 33 cents, and a gallon of milk in 89 was $2.32. I guess that's about it. Who's got a question? Let's see what I can answer. Okay, Mrs. Martin?
When you first started selling milk back in 1921, you didn't cool it in any way, did you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you did cool. You cooled it in the tank and stirred it with the old stirrer.
I've forgotten that. Everybody had to have a milk house.
Yeah.
It had to be away from the barn. Beckes and Baker over here made milk houses 6 by 8 feet and drew them out to the farm. Many farmers bought them. They were on skids. And then you put a cement tank in them to hold the water. I know our particular tank had two compartments that held 2 cans each. It'd be better for just 1 can each, I mean, it would cool better. There were several men in the neighborhood that had cement block milk houses. They would be cooler than the wooden milk houses. But these milk houses cost $45, 6 by 8 feet, delivered.
Now, did they stir it with one of the old long stirrer? Later they had the hydrovac.
You stirred it some.
hydrovac was when the hose was hooked to the thing, and it had a stir that went down the can, and the water going around, turned the
Well, I don't remember those. We didn't have anything like that. We just go with a stir.
Well, I can remember that though.
Yeah.
Hydrovac.
Yes, you mentioned Mrs. Whipple. I think you already introduced her because I didn't know who she was until Pat told me. So
Okay.
I think you should introduce her.
Well, then, welcome to Steve. Will you stand, let everyone see who you are? I'm just so glad she called me on the phone the other night. Babs told me he was coming tonight, and I said, well, Babs, you forgot more than I'll ever tell you tonight. I'm so glad to see everybody here, especially, I know pretty everybody.
Dorothy
Dr. Kern?
I was asking him a little bit before about Ben Fry.
Okay.
And because we live in his old house.
That's right. Ben Fry was the field man over there for a while, well, when I started, that's where the product comes.
I'd like to know how many people are here who, besides Lillian and myself, who worked at Wyeth, or whose husbands worked at Wyeth.
Well, Homer Bartlett worked for Wyeth, Carolyn Forty.
Worked there for years.
Not too many of us, though.
Not too many of it, no.
25 years he worked there.
4 or 5? I think that's
25.
right.
25.
25.
Homer, I told you the last week, I don't think I'd tell you anything tonight.
I have a question.
Okay?
I wonder how many people in this room were brought up on Wyeth SMA.
Only children were.
My wife worked there, so we got a discount, wholesale.
Good, good.
So we brought all our 6 children up on SMA.
I was at one time, and Tim Cotton was there. And he said he was raised on SMA. I said,